Calendars are only good for 1 year, but if you store them in a cool, dry place, you can reuse them 7 years later. All the dates will line up like they should. Today, we are making a calendar that is good for all of eternity. Let's say it's this month. Let's say it's this month. Or whatever this month is. Just know that I oopsied and made it look like this in the video. Keep an eye on what the actual plans are going to look like, because I made it way too big. But hey, 95% of YouTubers aren't giving you the measurements or the free plans anyway, so enjoy. Cramps? Ooh, typo. And I was like, no, he says cramps all the time. Cramps? So I Googled it and I was like, am I dumb? Yes. Apparently they also are called cramps. Cramps. It's a thing. There's been a little bit of mental back and forth with this project over the last couple days, mainly because I didn't know what wood types I wanted to use. And I went to Menards. I was like, you know, it'd be fun to play around with a little aspen in this project. Let's see how it goes. So I picked up a 1x6x4 and 2 1/4x6x4s. And I was satisfied. I came home. But I was like, you know, I want the wood that's going to have the numbers on it. That's got to be a lighter wood so that it lets the numbers pop. But the wood that actually hides the other numbers, I'd kind of like that to be a darker wood, so it's kind of a two-tone. It looked pretty cool, and I was like, you know what? Black walnut. Love it. I got everything set up. I was getting ready to mill it down. I'm just going to use the wood that I bought because this is a headache, and I don't want to do it. And instead of picking up the 4-foot lengths, if you guys went ahead and got the 6-foot lengths, that gives you a little bit extra oopsie board in case you make an error. I have just enough to build this project at maximum size, and fingers crossed, no mistake. I've added in the months of the year. I'm not putting them in my project. They're just on the template in case you guys wanted to use them. Look at them for spacing, ideas, whatever. I'm not doing it. I've never wondered what month of the year it is, and I'd like to keep it fairly minimal. I don't like it being too busy. At the miter saw, cut 2 pieces at 15.5 inches. That extra piece can be a little long. They all 3 don't need to match. We're going to use this piece a little later in the project, so just set him aside for now. But this here is going to become the calendar. Bam. And we're going to trim a little bit off of either the top or bottom, because once I glue this up, which is going to be the piece that wraps around and hides the numbers, it can't be the same height as this. We're going to get onto all that in a moment. With the 2 thinner 1/4-inch boards, I'm cutting 4 pieces at 15 inches because this part of the calendar does not have to be as long as this, the part that actually has the numbers on it, because the thicker 1-inch boards here, that's what actually slides in between these guys. So I cut them to 15 inches just to give me a little bit of extra space so I can trim them off, you know, if during glue up something happens. And then we're going to glue these 2 boards together and these 2 boards together and these 2 boards together. So grab your cramps and glue it all together. The glue is dry. The boards are looking purty. And I added these boards to the top and bottom, and that's just to help the boards stay like this instead of, you know, being wrong. And comment tip number 57, I added some clear tape to the bottoms of these boards just to see if it helps me get them off here in just a moment. So let's see. Oh, wow. Wow, I don't even have to, it didn't stick to anything. Cool. And now comes the part that gets us out of bed in the morning, the sanding. I start out by using this hand plane just to knock off the little glue drips from the bottoms, and that's only if you didn't take the time to actually wipe them off with a wet cloth yesterday, but oh well. Sand them down, get them pretty smooth. Before I get into what in the heck is going on over here, I took those 2 1/4-inch thinner cut boards over to the miter saw, used a little blue tape just to hold them together so they wouldn't, you know, jog or jag or move on me. And then I cut one edge flush, cutting the other edge to 15.5 inches. And that leaves me with 2 pretty good cuts. They're a little warpy. We'll fix that when we glue everything else together. The Mach 1 plans, the columns, these guys here, they were spaced smaller than the rows, which were these. So when I went to make my circles, I'd have a nice row of circles, I'd have this weird space, and I'd have a row of circles, and I wanted all of the circles to be equally spaced vertically and horizontally, just because I wanted to be a little more aesthetically pleasing. So then I made Mach 2, and I was like, you know, I could blow them up just a little bit because I got some board, and I dreamed too big because it hangs off the edge. And then I'm thinking, you know, why even go off the plans at all? Why don't I just tell you how you can draw them yourselves? Yeah, don't click out of the video. I know, it's not that long of a process. So to start out, I'm going to find this center line. There is a solid chance this is going to go like this, okay? Because I can't draw like this. I'm going to stand up because I feel like that would help me. Oh man, that's a dream. I'm going to make them 1 inch. These tick marks were 1 1/8 at the top, and I was like, that's hard math. So instead of, you know, putting that and then a 9/16 line for half, no thanks. So here we are, 5 inch. That's my first line. Then I go 6, 7, 8. I only need 5 of these. So down 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Repeat it down at this end. Only problem is this is not long enough to get me to the other end, and that's all right. I first want to go in just 1/4 of an inch because I want to have a little bit of a lip on the edge. I don't want the circles to be so pressed to the sides that it looks like it's too small. So move in 1/8 of an inch, and then again 1 inch lines. 1, 2, 3, 4. Not counting them. So thought I needed 15 for a second. I only need 13. I need 13 lines going this way, 5 lines going up and down. There they are. Let me find a larger straight edge. Then you're just going to line up, draw your lines. I prematurely finished my grid because this is technically my very last number 13 box, but because there's a spot on the very start and the very end, I actually already have 13 lines, and I really need lines, not spaces. If I'd made 13 boxes, you're going to have to find the dead center of each box, and that's where you would drill it out. If you guys had lined out and actually had this many lines, not boxes, see how confused I am? You could just use those as your center spots. They're all perfectly spaced. I would reject this one because, again, I did make 5 boxes, which actually would give me 6 lines. So I really only need 4 boxes to get me 5 lines. That's making sense. So see how I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I have 13 across. If I followed these and I drilled these out, they're all evenly spaced, they're all perfect, and it leaves me a little extra room on the 2 borders. And this is true for any size calendar you guys want to build. So if you don't want to follow these plans or this plan and you want to make, I don't know, let's just say it's 8 foot long. You want to make an 8 foot by whatever size calendar, you can. You'd take your 8 foot, I'd turn it into inches, 96 inches. 96 divided by 13. Gives me 7.38. So let's just say we took it to 7 1/4 to make it even. 1/4 of 12 inches is 3 inches. So if you made 7 inches, oh my gosh, what? 7, 10 inches. So it'd be 10 inches. If you made each grid 10 inches by 10 inches, this thing would be blown up to pretty close to 8 foot large. That's a sweet calendar. Also takes a lot of wood. Even if you didn't want to do 1 inch and you did 1.5 inches, you know, you're going to get a bigger calendar. If you did 2 inches, you'd have twice the size of this. I'm just limited on the wood I bought. Again, I would honestly go with some 6 foot boards instead of 4 foot. You wouldn't run into this conundrum. And with woodworking, your possibilities are endless. So not only can you pick what size grid you guys are using, you can also pick what size of hole you want to drill out for the numbers to poke through this board. I went with just a 3/4, a 3/8, and a half. They're not in order. If you did a 3/4, you get an additional 1/4 inch because 1 inch minus 3/4 is 1/4. And that would give you an 1/8 inch on either side if it was centered. So that gives me a good amount of space right here, just so that, you know, I'm not bumping into other things, and it shouldn't make it too fragile, and that's a pretty large maximum number I could go. If you went up to like a 5/8 for this, now you are cutting down the spacing that you have in between each grid, and it might just get a little more fragile. 3/8, way too much space. It looks kind of silly. 1/2 inch wouldn't be too bad, but you're limiting how much space you have to make these numbers, so your numbers will have to be smaller, harder to read. I like the 3/4. Play around with it before you do it. Since all of the spots that I need to drill out are already marked, I grab a 3/4 Forstner bit, throw it into the drill press, and get to work. You only need to do this to one of the 3/4 boards. The other one is going to be your back, and just put a board underneath there just to limit blowout. You don't want blowout for these. It's a very thin material. Well, my baby drill press can't reach the centers, so I'm gonna have to cut this down to size right now. I'll leave 2 inches at the top and a 1-inch space on the bottom. And be sure to cut the 1/4 inch back to match the size of the front with all the holes that we just cut down. Say on that board you just drilled 6,000 holes into, but be careful, she's fragile. You guys recall at the beginning of the video where I glued this board up and we made her all purty? Good times. You also remember shortly after that I talked about how these plans were just a little too big for the board. Yeah. Well, looking at this, I accidentally put this on top. I don't need this anymore. I don't need you anymore! Without further ado, it's going to obviously fit all my numbers, you know. Looks real good. Let me get a length check. I'm at 16 3/4. I like that it has a little extra because, you know, when it's bumped all the way to one side, you'll have a bit sticking out so you can grab it to pull the other direction. I don't ever want it to be slammed up against where you have to push on this side. No. Round your edges, sand those off, sand this board. Next, I'm going to center this board best I can inside of the holes, just making sure everybody gets good coverage. Looks to be about right there would be fine. Very light score mark because I've already sanded this. 1 3/4. 3/4. That's what I need. And since I used the rest, this was just one board, I'm going to have to cut a little off of this board. Drats. Now I have my 3/4 board, my 1 3/4 board, and I got this guy for in between, and she's looking pretty nice. Same thickness as this material here. Be careful with your 3/4 if you have one, because if it's, you know, the wrong direction, could be off slightly, that wouldn't be good. To get this glued into place, I'm going to just use some super glue. If you guys want to use a tight bond or a wood glue, go for it. Super glue has a crystallized bond. I think it's good for 4 years, so this calendar hopefully is still around. I cut up some little pieces of cardboard. I'm going to put those on the front and back here, and that just allows a spacer, work with me, for these. So that way when I glue and clamp everything together, it doesn't pinch this board on the inside. That's not what we want it to do. I want this to slide nice and free, but I don't want to give it such a gigantic space that it sits unlevel and it, you know, when you're moving it, it kind of wobbles. That's not good. I'm going to line up the bottom here, this board, to be flush and glue them down. Then I'm going to line up everything else because I know one board is going to be a little too long. That's fine, but I don't know. Good little line. Again, watch your grain direction. Make sure the edge that you'd cut is the edge that's facing the opposite way that you want it to. Get them lined up like this. Couple quick clamps. Put in your spacer, put in your board, put in your other spacer here. I'm going to run glue on this edge. Now with this one, I'm going to smack him in, glide him, kind of give him a good push to get him up against these others. So again, I want him to be tight. Just throw some clamps on him. I got this. Woohoo! Right on the edge. I'm going to give this just a sec to dry, probably about 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I have also labeled which one is the front because this one, he's got some blemishes. I definitely don't want that on the front. I've got a real bad tendency of going like this. So leave them like that. I scored a quick reference line on here because I need these two boards to line up. You don't want them like this in the end. So make sure that the front is where it's supposed to be. Now, this is a fast one because you got to do both at the same time. Now we wait a few minutes for the top to dry and just line up the bottom. Make sure that these edges match up. This is going to be a little long. I'm going to cut it once everything's dried and done. Get all of the cramps off of there. Get rid of these pieces of paper. You can see this moves freely. It doesn't have much play at all. It just rests and glides like it should. So fully take this board out for a moment. I'm going to trim off all of this excess wood that's surrounding the 1/4-inch boards. You can do it with, the miter saw, trying to be all perfect. Table saw, get rid of the long sides. I'm going to do these on the bandsaw because I don't trust my miter saw. It's usually off like 1 degree, and that just messes this whole thing up. Get that extra material removed. Same washer and pencil method. I know I did them backwards. Line it up, draw your line, cut it off. And now we have a completed, whatever you want to call this part, and the part that's going to hold all of the numbers. I'm going to put the numbers on after I finish staining everything. I don't want the stain to cause anything to smear. That would be bad. So this part here, I love me some honey. I'm going to put honey on it. It's this darker color here. Delicious. Lighter color, just a natural. It's going to go on the piece with the numbers. That way the numbers pop. And painting inside of here is going to be a nightmare. But we're going to get there. We're going to deal with it. And let me tell you, another tip, move all of your projects well out of the way. Get yourself one of these little stirrer thingies that you use for coffee. You pop that inside, give it a mix, and it stirs that can beautifully. And when you're done, put it inside I put it inside of a mug. Power on real quick just to spread it all around in there. This is actually attached. There's been so much stain in there. And bam, you're done. Something else that's pretty cool is that it also takes any of the little fibers. If you guys are like me and you use towels because you're cheap, it takes all those out when it's spinning around. Easy peasy. Let's get these guys stained up. And I know this has kept you on the edge of your seat the entire video, but you're like, hey, how did you get such perfect numbers in this little grid? And let me tell you, it was with a Sharpie. And sure, you could fire up your Cricut and measure them out, make them the right size. Heck, probably even space them correct so this lays down nice and easy. And sure, you probably could head over to the store and just find some little stick-on numbers. Those would look pretty good too, as long as they were anchored down to the board and they didn't peel up when you shoved it through. Or sure, fire up the old projection system, fire them down, draw them in that way. There's all kinds of ways you can get the numbers on there. I'm using a Sharpie. To do that, I'm going to hand doodle them. Nothing intense about this. I'm going to start right here at this 7. Work my way over because I know some of these are empty. Hit the next row. And when I get done, I'm going to take this board completely out and hit them all with the Sharpie. I'd write this down in the books as the biggest mistake of the year. Calendars are only 7 across, which was foreshadowed in this piece that I had off, but that doesn't matter. I got all the numbers and I'm like, how do you read it? I don't. Time to chop it up a little bit. Now the video makes no sense throughout the entire thing. Mistakes happen. A little bit of stain and no one will even know it happened. Except that it's in the video the whole time. And the old plans still have it wrong. Those were completely done. But the new plans, don't worry about them. The new plans are looking good. This isn't something that normally happens. All right, I'm sorry. But just go check out another video. This one's a bust. Nothing's gonna stop you if you wanna just use poplar, lar, la la.